In this video, I'm going to explore two tragic murders that occurred here in South Australia. The first was the murder of 10-year-old Louise Bell on January the 4th, 1983. And the second murder was that of another 10-year-old, Michael Black, on January the 18th, 1989. Both children were murdered by a man named Pfennig. And we're going to look at the locations associated with both crimes. I'm standing in front of number 5 Meadow Way, Hackham West, 25 kilometres south of Adelaide, and it was here on the night of January 4th, 1983, that 10-year-old Louise Bell was abducted. Now on Tuesday night, January 4th, 1983, 10-year-old Louise goes to bed in this house in the same room as her younger sister Rachel, with her parents Colin and Diane in the same house. Now sometime during the night of the 4th and the 5th, Louise is abducted from her bedroom by Pfennig, who apparently cut open a fly screen to access the room, but how Louise was lured out of that home is still unknown. Pfennig must have lured her out. Louise must have willingly gone out of the room. So I assume the window was open that night, but the fly screen was closed. Now that particular night of January 4th, 1983, it was 24 degrees Celsius in Adelaide that day, and during the night it was 14 degrees Celsius, which is actually quite mild for Adelaide in January. But the next morning, January 5th, 1983, Louise's parents go to her bedroom, and Louise is missing. Her younger sister Rachel is unharmed, but the fly screen is opened and Louise is gone. This is a bit of a closer look at number 5 Meadowbank Way. Now obviously the houses have changed over the years, and back in 1983 I believe there was no fence here, and I don't think these scrubs and bushes were here, but I think the window Louise was taken out of was that window there, I do believe. There's two there, so I think it's that one there. Again, we don't know how Pfennig lured Louise out of that window. The likelihood of Pfennig striking her, knocking her unconscious, or dragging her physically out of a room appears extremely unlikely because, as mentioned, Louise's younger sister was asleep in the room and she never woke, she never saw a thing. So the only assumption is that Pfennig somehow enticed Louise out of the window through the cut windscreen which Pfennig cut, and then took her out here in the Meadowbank Way and gone forever. This is number 31 Holly Rise, Hackham West. This is about 800 to 900 metres from Louise Bell's home at 5 Meadow Way, Hackham West. At the time of Louise's abduction in 1983, this was the home of her killer, Pfennig. Now, the police, after Pfennig was charged with Michael Black's murder, he came under suspicion for Louise's murder. So this property was actually first searched back in 1991, but nothing of value was found, and they searched it again in 2012. I guess they were probably looking for Louise's body, which wasn't here. Now, the connection between Pfennig and Louise Bell, she wasn't a completely random victim. Pfennig was a school teacher. I believe he was a high school teacher, and Louise at the time was in primary school, so I'm pretty sure Pfennig wasn't Louise's teacher in any way. But Pfennig had a daughter around Louise's age, and Louise and Pfennig's daughter played basketball together, so he obviously had seen Louise. And Pfennig was known to walk the neighbourhood late at night. He claimed it was fighting off insomnia, but I'm sure it was for more nefarious purposes, and he must have walked from this home, as I said, just under a kilometre away from Louise's house, on that fateful night to Louise's home and abducted her. So if Pfennig left his home on foot on Holly Rise here in Hackham West, there are actually a series of alleyways that could have that could have helped Pfennig in his journey to Louise Bell's home. Now, on the night Louise was abducted, a man who lived in this street actually saw Pfennig out and about walking late at night. Of course, that begs the question, if Pfennig was on foot, how the hell did he get Louise all the way back here to his home? He must have walked her back. I think the general assumption is that he did walk to Louise's home and obviously had to walk back, and as I said, it's under a kilometre, 800, 900 metres perhaps. Yeah, but that's a fair walk if you're abducting someone. Now here's an alleyway here. It's amazing these alleyways are still up. Pfennig could well have walked through these alleyways. At his trial back in the 2010s, the jury was actually shown these alleyways as a possible walking route for Pfennig. And if he used these alleyways, less people would have seen him with Louise, because nobody came forward and said they saw a man and a young girl walking, which indicates Louise went willing with him. I mean, there's so many different permutations. Now, we emerge from Holly Rise Road, just checking my map, into Valley View Crescent. I believe, and as you can see, straight across the road, there is another alleyway. That Pfennig could have utilised. Now this alleyway, I believe, leads into Williams Avenue. And this is a very narrow alleyway. So yeah, this makes a lot more sense. Well, this is the purpose of alleyways, to help pedestrians. I live in an area where so many alleyways have been closed. As I said, this will emerge into Williams Avenue. And we're not far at all from Louise's home already. This has certainly cut walking time considerably. Now from here, okay, so we're in Williams Avenue. This looks like a court of some description. Okay, I actually emerged into Willowwood Place. That was the street I've emerged into. It's a little closed off street, and then you come over to Williams Avenue. So this is Williams Avenue, but lo and behold, just across the street from Williams Avenue is yet another alleyway. Very, very convenient. Now this alleyway from Williams Avenue leads into Vinters Walk, and that'll take us basically one street from Louise's house. So by using these network of alleyways, this would have aided Pfennig immeasurably. He still would have had to have appeared in streets, but it would have certainly cut down greatly any chance of him being spotted by people. This was late at night, obviously. Well, I'm not exactly what time Louise was abducted. As a 10-year-old child, she went to bed relatively early. But Pfennig could have struck after midnight, early in the morning, so less and less people around. Now we've emerged into Vinters Walk. Okay, so still in Vinters Walk. Now the advantage to Vinters Walk is that there's a reserve area to the left if you're heading towards Louise's house. So that's another advantage for Pfennig. Now, as I stand here on Vinters Walk, I am no more than maybe 500 metres from Louise's home. If I just zoom in up here, you can see the beginning of Louise Bell's former street. Right there. So by using those alleyways, Pfennig certainly could have avoided detection. But there's so much speculation. How did he get Louise out? How did he walk her here? But he must have done it some way, because Pfennig murdered her. So you can see how easy it would have been for Dieter Pfennig to obscure himself in the streets of Hackham West on the night he abducted Louise Bell. This is number 19 Underbank Grove in Hackham West. We are 400 metres from 5 Meadow Way, Louise Bell's home. And it was here that lived in January 1983 a woman by the name of Kathleen Smith. Now on January 17th, 1983, 12 days after Louise's abduction, Mrs. Smith received a phone call from an unknown man. He said he had Louise captive and that he needed information for Louise's asthma. He also gave her 2 phone numbers to call to contact him, though he also mentioned that he had Louise's asthma under control. He then said that Louise's earrings could be found on the corner of Beach Road and Main South Road, which is about 1 kilometre from here. Now, of course, Mrs. Smith contacted the police, and the phone numbers that this unknown caller gave her were actually the phone numbers of newspapers officers. And of course, the earrings were actually later found where he said they were. I'm standing on the corner of Beach Road and Main South Road, Morford Vale, just over 1 kilometre from Louise Bell's former home in Meadow Way. And it was here that Louise's earrings were found. Recall that on January 17th, 12 days after Louise's abduction, an anonymous caller rang a woman named Kathleen Smith and said Louise's earrings could be found on this very corner. And indeed they were. Why Pfennig would do that, who knows? Obviously part of his power trip. But this is where they were found, the corner of Main South Road and Beach Road. Now, number 19 Underbank Grove. Poor old Kathleen Smith wasn't finished yet, for on February the 28th, 1983, which is less than 2 months after Louise's abduction, Mrs. Smith early one morning was taking her son to school when she found a pyjama top here on the front lawn of this house. She ignored the article of clothing and took her son to school. When she returned to this home, circa 9 a.m, she picked up the pyjama top and neatly folded it. She placed it next to her rubbish bin, intending to throw it out, and only later did she realise that it may be connected to Louise Bell's abduction. So she contacted the police, and Louise's parents identified the pyjama top as Louise's. It was a Christmas present they had given her at Christmas 1982, just weeks before Louise was abducted. It was identified because the label had been removed on it, as Louise had complained about it scratching her. So Louise's pyjama top was found right here in this home. Louise wasn't wearing any pyjama bottoms that night, so it was just her top was found. And that pyjama top, which Dieter Pfennig must have left here for why he picked this house out, reasons unknown. I guess he just selected someone random. But that pyjama top would in the end be enough to incriminate Pfennig at his 2016 trial. That pyjama top found here would have his traces of DNA on it, and that would be used to convict him. So after the abduction of Louise Bell in January 1983, there were some dramatic developments.
Later that year, police actually arrested a man named Raymond John Giesing and charged him with Louise Bell's murder. Now, Giesing, I believe, was a known child sex offender, and he lived in very close proximity to Louise in Hackham West. And I believe the crux of the case was that two fellow prisoners, I guess Giesing had been in prison for child abuse, and two other prisoners claimed that Giesing had confessed to murdering Louise. And in November 1983, Raymond Giesing was actually convicted of Louise's murder. But on April the 12th, 1985, Giesing's conviction was overturned and Giesing was freed. So they certainly got the wrong man in that case. Ironically, well, perhaps predictably, years later in December 2009, Giesing, now known as Raymond John Bolt, was actually convicted of child sex offences here in Adelaide. And as to his current fate, I'm not sure, but whatever heinous crimes Giesing had committed against children, he did not murder Louise Bell, and they did certainly have the wrong man there.
So we've been on the ground for the Louise Bell locations, but I just want to show you the maps, which gives a much different perspective of where everything was concerning Louise Bell's abduction in Hackham West. So Louise Bell's house was here at number 5 Meadow Way, Hackham West. Now, Dita Pfennig's house was just down here at 31 Holly Rise. So Louise up here, Pfennig here. And the alleyways I cut through would have taken me through that area there. Now, Kathleen Smith, remember, the woman who lived on 19 Underbank Grove, she lived here, who found Louise's pyjama top. And you can see how close she is to so Kathleen Smith lived there and Louise lived right there. Now, Raymond Giesing we just talked about. Giesing lived at 14 Hagen Crescent in Hackham West, which is, so Louise Bell's house is here, and Giesing's house was, what's that, just a block and a bit away from Louise. So that's where everything was in Hackham West. Now, next we will explore the murder of Michael Black. And Michael Black, his abduction occurred much further away, outside of Adelaide. It occurred in Murray Bridge, which we have to go east to. Murray Bridge is about 78 kilometres east of Adelaide. So we'll look at two principal locations for the Michael Black abduction. The first one is at Sturt Reserve, which is next to the Murray River. This location here, this is where Michael was abducted by Dita Pfennig. And the second location, just pan back a bit, was at Sturt Reserve, which is right in here. So this is Sturt Reserve here. Now this is where Pfennig staged a drowning scene to try to throw police off the trail that Michael in fact had drowned. So they're the two locations we will examine in Murray Bridge. So let's go on the ground for the Michael Black locations. I'm at Sturt Reserve, Murray Bridge, the scene of the 1989 abduction of 10-year-old Michael Black. I'm here in Murray Bridge, which is 75 kilometres from Adelaide. Now, 10-year-old Michael Black was abducted somewhere in this reserve on Wednesday afternoon, January the 18th, 1989. Michael, who lived nearby, left home circa 1 p.m. on his bicycle and with his dog, and they came to this reserve to go fishing on the Murray River, which, if I just pan to the left, is just over there. I'm currently on the foreshore. Michael was carrying his fishing rod and a canvas bag, so it was just Michael and his dog. But this is where Michael was last seen on that day in January 1989. So 10-year-old Michael arrived here at Sturt Reserve at approximately 1:30 p.m. that Wednesday afternoon, and several people confirmed his presence here. But the last confirmed sighting of Michael was at 2:25 p.m. Now, of course, later a man named Dieter Pfennig was convicted of Michael's murder, even though Michael's body has never been found. So let's go into the what Dieter Pfennig was up to at that time. Now, his wife later said that Pfennig was away from home between January 14th and the 20th, 1989. And of course, Michael's abduction was January 18th. His wife said he left home driving his white combi van. Pfennig saying he was studying physics for his next teaching job. Pfennig was a school teacher. Now, Pfennig was definitely seen here on Tuesday, January the 17th, 1989, which was the day before Michael's abduction. Pfennig was seen here at approximately 4 p.m. by a witness named Mr. Smart. Pfennig approached Mr. Smart and asked him if he knew of a place where he could swim nude. And soon after that, Pfennig approached two young children who were swimming from the wharf. Not exactly sure where the wharf is here, but it's in this area around here. And he asked the children, Pfennig asked the children if there was any interesting places to visit. He then invited the children back to his van. Thankfully, they declined. So that was the day before Michael Black's abduction here at Sturt Reserve. Now, coming back to January the 18th, 1989, Dieter Pfennig was seen that afternoon by a witness named Mrs. Rook, who saw Pfennig sitting in his van watching her and her two young children. Now again, I'm not exactly sure that exact location. This is a car park here. If I pan over to the right, you can see Murray River. But Pfennig was definitely observed here watching the woman and the two children. Now, at approximately 2:25 p.m, a witness named Mr. Haynes saw a man speaking to Michael Black. Now, that man's description of that man differed somewhat to Dieter Pfennig, but Dieter Pfennig later did admit to several people, including his own daughter, that he did in fact speak to Michael Black that day here at Sturt Reserve. Now, as I said, the last confirmed sighting of Michael, that was it, at around 2:25 p.m. At approximately 2:45 p.m, a council worker saw a white combi van, matching Pfennig's van description, speed out of Sturt Reserve. There's several ways to exit Sturt Reserve, most likely that location, in that direction, sorry. And that was the last anyone ever saw of Michael Black. It's safe to assume that Pfennig abducted Michael Black at that point, lured him into his van somehow, and then drove away. But this is the location where Michael Black was last seen on January 18th, 1989. So Michael was last seen here at Sturt Reserve, but the next location associated with Michael Black's abduction takes us across the bridge to the opposite side of Murray Bridge, to Sturt Reserve. And undoubtedly Pfennig drove across the bridge, and where he would go to Sturt Reserve, where he would try to stage and make it appear as if Michael Black had in fact drowned after leaving Sturt Reserve here. I'm now at a place called Sturt Reserve. This is approximately 2.5 kilometres from Sturt Reserve, where Michael Black was abducted from. Now, I'm the opposite side of the Murray River, so I guess this would be the eastern side of Murray Bridge. Now, it was here that Pfennig tried to stage Michael Black's disappearance as a drowning. He set a scene up to make it appear as if Michael had drowned somewhere around here, because Michael's bike, his fishing rod, his canvas bags and his thongs were found neatly stacked around here somewhere. His shirt was found in willows, and nearby they found a piece of twine which was tied to a tree stump, which must have been for Michael's dog, because Michael's dog was actually found in this area. So Pfennig must have been trying to make it appear as if it was a drowning, and that was the initial assumption. Now, Michael was never seen here at Teely Reserve. No one saw him here. Most likely he was either subdued or perhaps even dead at that point, but no one saw him. And police did launch an extensive search of the river here, and as I said, the initial assumption was that Michael did in fact drown. But there was no reason, and obviously his body was never found, but there was no reason for Michael to be on this side of the river. He wouldn't have come this way. So now, there was a woman named Mrs. Gould who lived above the reserve, and she heard something pertinent. Now, this Mrs. Gould, they said, lived above the reserve, so I'm thinking it's that house in that area where you're looking at now, which is above Teely Reserve. Now, she said between 3 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. she heard a noisy vehicle in this reserve here, spinning its wheels in the gravel, and a dog barking excitedly. And then another witness named Mr. Jones at approximately 4 p.m. he also saw a combi van near a boat ramp. I'm not sure. Well, the boat ramp is... So I'm going to have to turn you around a bit. Bear with me. So that's the boat ramp over there. That's where a Pfennig was, or a combi van was seen that matched Pfennig's description. So this is the area where Michael Black, what I call the stage scene, was set by Dita Pfennig to make it appear as if Michael had drowned in the Murray River here at Teely Reserve. After the murder of Michael Black in January 1989, Pfennig would strike again for the last time, but fortunately and amazingly, his next victim managed to escape alive. It was Saturday, December the 30th, 1989. A 13-year-old boy was riding his BMX bike in the southern suburb of Port Noarlunga. Now, Port Noarlunga is it's very close to Hackham West, where Louise Bell was abducted and where Pfennig lived. Pfennig was parked in his van, and he called the boy over. The boy came over to the van, and Pfennig asked him to help retrieve keys from a compartment inside the van. And unfortunately, the boy got into the van. Pfennig got in behind him, closed the van doors, and pushed the boy down and threatened him to do as he says. This is a very interesting way. I'm sure this is how the Michael Black abduction went down, in similar circumstances. And undoubtedly this was Pfennig's modus operandi. After securing the boy in the back of the van, Pfennig then actually got out and put the BMX bike the boy was riding into the van. Pfennig then tied the boy's hands behind his back. He blindfolded him, put a sock in his mouth, and taped his mouth and ankles. Pfennig then drove around for about half an hour before he stopped in a car park. After that, Pfennig then drove to the beach. Port Noarlunga in that area is a coastal area. Exactly where all this happened, I simply do not know. At the beach, Pfennig dumped the BMX bike after wiping it of fingerprints.
Pfennig then drove around for another 2 more hours and then stopped at some unknown location, and there Pfennig sexually assaulted the 13-year-old boy. After that, Pfennig, with the boy in the van, drove to his house. Now, I'm assuming that was 31 Holly Rise in Hackham West. Not 100% sure, but I'm assuming that was where Pfennig was still living. Pfennig obviously also had a wife and children, but at that stage I'm not exactly sure where they were, but nonetheless. Anyway, so Pfennig took the boy inside the house, where once again the victim was sexually abused by Pfennig. And the boy was held at Pfennig's house all night. The next morning was Sunday, December 31st, 1989, New Year's Eve. Pfennig tied the boy to a chair and Pfennig left the house. But fortunately, the young boy managed to get free and escape from the house and alerted the police. And this was the downfall of Dita Pfennig. When Pfennig returned to the house, the police were waiting, and Pfennig was arrested, obviously, and charged with the assault on the boy. Pfennig pled guilty to the sexual assault of the boy, and while in custody, he was charged with Michael Black's murder, and he was convicted of Michael Black's murder, despite Pfennig feigning innocence. So with Dita Pfennig in prison for the murder of Michael Black, the police worked away as Pfennig as the logical suspect in the abduction and presumed murder of Louise Bell. And the years ticked by with the police working away, but eventually there was a major breakthrough in the case when on November the 19th, 2013, Dita Pfennig was charged with the murder of Louise Bell. Pfennig went to trial. It was a judge-only trial, no jury. The main piece of evidence against Pfennig was undoubtedly the DNA that was obtained from Louise's pajama top. That, as I showed earlier, was found in a neighbour's, well, Pfennig must have placed it there, at a neighbour's place, front yard near Louise's home, which Pfennig wouldn't have realised at the time, but he'd sealed his own fate. That DNA was tested, and Pfennig's DNA was discovered to be on Louise's pajama top. So that was really the main crux of the case. What was also introduced into evidence was an alleged confession that Dita Pfennig made to a fellow prisoner. Now this occurred circa Christmas 2006. Pfennig obviously in prison, and he and another inmate were apparently smoking marijuana and got to chatting about things, and Pfennig was describing how he had murdered Michael Black. Well, he said he had murdered Michael Black. I don't know if he went into any details or not. And Pfennig revealed to the fellow inmate that he couldn't reveal to police where Michael Black's body was because there was, quote, a chick in there, quote. Pfennig's words, they are. And when the inmate said, "What chick?" Pfennig replied simply with the one word, "Bell," obviously referring to Louise. So if Pfennig is to be believed in that occasion, that Michael Black and Louise Bell are buried together somewhere. So in all this, on November the 10th, 2016, Dita Pfennig was convicted of Louise's murder and again sentenced to life imprisonment, which on top of the already life imprisonment he's serving for Michael Black's murder, I'm pretty sure Dita Pfennig will never see the light of day again. And as at the time of this recording, which is in September 2024, Dita Pfennig remains behind bars for the murder of Louise Bell and Michael Black.
As of this recording, September 2024, the bodies of Louise Bell and Michael Black have never been found. If we are to believe Pfennig and his jailhouse confession, then Louise and Michael are buried somewhere together. The question, of course, is where. Now, the pajama top, which contained Louise's pyjama top that contained Pfennig's DNA and convicted him also contained traces of the Onkaparinga River, which is right here. This is the Onkaparinga River here. I believe it flows into the ocean. It's about 88 kilometres long, the Onkaparinga River, and we know for a fact that Pfennig used to frequent this area, canoeing, etc. Now, so there's the river there, and Hackham West, let me just pop it up, is up here. So this is Hackham West, where Louise lived, where Pfennig lived, and the river is just down here. So I guess that there's a strong possibility that Louise and Michael are buried somewhere along that river, but well, we just don't know, and it's a needle in a haystack, but that is certainly a possibility. So at this point we can only hope that one day the remains of Louise and Michael are recovered so they can be given the respect that they deserve.